That isn't about to be finished.
Oh. From the hall.
And then
Keep the bag over on top. The bag on top. The bag on top.
see that. Oh. I'm scared.
Oh.
Oh.
So round.
Let's go see that.
Hello, Eric. Let me know if you can hear me, please. Eric, can you hear me? If you can't speak, can you do a reaction thumbs up? Hi, John.
Hello.
Making you a co-host.
It is my intent and desire to leave after the adaptive reuse.
Okay.
I can do the present. I can go through the presentation.
Right, but I'm gonna hear, but the person I just let in the room, Sky.
Yeah.
She's here as essentially the advocate kind of applicant on item 4, the CD 10 nomination of the monument, but Sky, you're back east, right?
Yeah.
Right, your
Right,
voice is
you're on
up.
mute, but we saw you say yes.
What I'm saying is she's 3 hours ahead, so I kind of feel we should just get through that quickly, unfortunately, unless you really object.
Yeah.
My intention is to be out by 8 o'clock either way.
That would be great.
Yes. But so, so what would therefore be your pleasure? I mean, do we want to accommodate?
Yeah, let's comment.
I'm by myself here in the Zoom room.
Oh boy.
I know. I mean,
didn't get a lot of traction on our agenda items.
Well, Teresa's going to log in from home, and Sky is back east, and Show King is here on Zoom. But I'm saying I'm really alone. Even the staff is out in the backyard. All alone here in the Zoom room. So anyway, John, whenever you wish to start, do you want me then to share you're going to do the blah, 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 but do you want me to share the agenda? Just tell me when you want to start.
Let's do it, 7:04.
So once again, I'm having a little trouble because I had opened up lots of things and they're not sitting here waiting for me. So,
Okay,
sorry, I'm
it's okay.
going to stop the share, find the agenda again.
I have it open.
You want to share that then? Because I don't know where it's gone on this computer.
How's that?
Yep, there you go.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is John Arnold. I am the co-chair along with
Laura Myers.
For the Planning and Zoning, UNNC Planning and Zoning Committee. Welcome to our bi-weekly meeting. Today's Wednesday, July 19th, 2023. We are now hybrid. We can show up in person at the South Seas House, open to the public. And of course, the Zoom is open to the public as well, as it always has been since the pandemic started. So welcome, and I'll call this meeting to order. Just a review of the standing rules. We generally go around the room, introduce ourselves. We also introduce our our intention to vote, which means you declare your stakeholder status, which means you're a resident, you're a property owner, you attend an institution or own a business, or is it working in a business as well, Laura?
If you work at, attend
that
church
has a
school.
brick and mortar presence in the UNNC footprint. So my name is John Arnold. I am a resident of Jefferson Park. I'm co-chair of this committee, and I will be voting tonight. Laura?
Yes, I'm Laura Myers. I am sitting in the Zoom area where we're not hybrid, we're in real life, but I apologize if I keep forgetting to look directly at you guys on the screen, because I'm also looking at the computer screen and I forget it's not the screen. Anyway, I am on the UNNC board. I live in Angeles Vista, and I do intend to vote.
Great. Show King.
Hi, we're just introducing ourselves.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Show King. I'm new to the committee. This is like my second week. We just got sworn in. Super excited to help out and serve in the community. And I'm originally from the Bay Area. And so I believe there's something in the water up there that makes us do this community work like we do.
We have something in the water down here as well. Thank you, Show King. Thanks for attending. I'm just going down the pike. Sky. If you don't wish to introduce yourself, that's also possible. I think Sky, you're a presenter tonight.
Well, she's not a presenter so much, but she does need to unmute and say, hey.
Okay, we're going to go on to Teresa.
Hey, everybody, I'm Teresa Masonette. I represent the West Adams Avenues on the board, and I am a stakeholder.
Great. Eric's Autopilot. You wish to speak, please do. If you don't have to. Okay, moving on. Donna Jones.
I talk too much, so I'll make up for the others. Donna Jones, West Adams Avenues, and I am a stakeholder. Have a nice.
We should all get in a room together and talk too much and see who's the last person standing. Okay, anyone else who wants to introduce themselves, please raise their hand. If not, we will move on to review the agenda. Okay, seeing no hands. So the agenda is on your screen. We have general public comments, and we have 5 cases today. Laura has noted that for item number 4, there is someone in the audience, that is Sky, who will be representing CD10. Is that correct, Laura?
She's one of the advocates who asked CD10 to do the nomination. I do not know if Hakeem is coming from CD10 or not.
So we've been asked if we could shuffle item number 4 up to item number 3 and move item number 3 down. Anyone objects to that, please let me know. Okay, seeing no hands, so let's, I move to rearrange the agenda. Items 1, 2 stay the same, 4 becomes 3, 3 becomes 4, and then 5, 6, 7 as presented. Do we have to vote on this, Laura?
No.
Okay, great. Okay, so so let's move on to public comments. Anyone in the audience who has anything that they want to say to this committee that is not agendized, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. So we'll now move down to item number 4, review of CD10 initiated historic cultural monument nomination for 1802 South Crenshaw, council file 23 CF 230435. So Laura, I'm going to hand this over.
I'm going to hit yes and stop your screen share.
Yep, I can stop. I can do that myself. So I'm going to hand this over to Laura, that she'll be managing this case tonight.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I'm having a little trouble. So sorry. I found my item, but I'm not screen sharing. So there we go. Okay. So I will ask Sky, hopefully she'll be able to jump in as soon as we finish the discussion on the motion. So in June, maybe a little, actually in April, Council District 10 did a motion, and this was based on requests from community stakeholders. But the city council can, on its own, initiate the consideration of any property throughout the city as a proposed designation as a historic cultural monument. So the normal process is someone like me does a nomination, but in this case, the council office did a nomination, and that I've got that up, the motion up on the screen, and basically 1802 South Crenshaw Boulevard is a significant example of early 20th century architecture in Los Angeles and is one of the few remaining examples of its type of architecture. It was built in 1915 for and by the Cunningham family, and they were pioneers in the mortuary business, and essentially the founders and long time owners of Cunningham and O'Connor Catholic mortuary. And in the motion, it talks about how it's a really good example of architecture. The Cultural Heritage Commission designees, 2 members of the commission and Office of Historic Resources, has recently toured the building, and it's still, as I've been told, it's actually a showcase of the era because all the original furniture is still in place. So the same family owns it and they've never decluttered. It's all the same. So it's an interesting kind of museum quality house. So the city council woman, Heather Hutt, nominated this, and it is moving through the normal system. And I'm going to stop the share. We do have in the agenda packet the draft nomination, but I think if Sky could jump in and explain why the neighbors are so passionate about this. Or if Eric is here from Lafayette Square, that'd be fine. But if one of you could unmute yourselves and explain. I don't know how well they're connecting to this meeting because we haven't heard from them yet. Okay, well, I'm going to move on and just explain then the process. So the basic process when the city council nominates something as a landmark is that it will not do the first hearing at the Cultural Heritage Commission. So it skips the first hearing and goes straight to a tour of the property. And then there's a second, what would normally be the second hearing becomes the only hearing. And the Cultural Heritage Commission, full commission, will evaluate the nomination, a staff report, photographs, and a report of the tour, and make a recommendation to City Council as to whether or not they're recommending that the specific building is eligible to be listed on the city's roster of historic places. It's a different process than if member of the public brings a nomination, because even if the Cultural Heritage Commission votes no, they don't like it, it still moves forward to City Council. It's the City Council that will decide one way or the other if something is to be designated historic. So UNNC and other neighborhood councils do the same thing. We'll normally do a quick review and make a recommendation as to whether or not we agree that this would be eligible to be placed on the city's roster of historic cultural monuments. So I'm sorry, I think again our participants are having trouble speaking. So I don't know how we want to proceed, John and Teresa and Donna. Let's show. Should I pull up the nomination? Should I tell you what I've learned about the nomination? John?
I would
Yes,
say
please.
make the pitch however you can, Laura, with either, I think we'd all be curious what it looks like and maybe a snapshot or two of what
Right.
you're talking about.
I don't have, so that's the thing. I don't have the photos. So this is what I know. A couple of things that I know. 25 years ago, I visited the house. And at the time and to this day, but again, the Cunningham family still owns the house, but they have disagreement within the family as to whether or not it should be designated as a landmark. This was true 25 years ago. It is true apparently to this day. And when I saw it, it was absolutely stunning. And absolutely stunning is not a usual thing to designate a house on. It's just that it's because it's so original. And in the basement, and it's still there because OHR told me, the whole basement is built out as a gigantic train village and train sets. I mean, it's just and that's all still there. So that wouldn't normally make something a landmark, but it's sort of this peek into the lives from 100 years ago that is apparently what's now impressing staff. The community was concerned about the proposed sale of this site, not of the house, but of the site as a development site. And it is adjacent to Bronson Avenue on its east flank, which is a historic protected street, R1 zone, has the character residential overlay, but also a identification as a potential National Register district. And immediately to its west is Lafayette Square, which is an HPOZ and also a historic district. So the people who are adjacent to this property are who lobbied the council office, as did other people in the community, to propose that it be designated. The issue for OHR at the moment is that the draft nomination, they feel the narrative's a bit incomplete, that it doesn't really explain why Thomas Cunningham, the builder, the owner, there's all the biographies say he is a pioneer in portraits in Los Angeles, but all those bios at the time didn't explain why he was a pioneer, and neither does yet the nomination. So they're requesting that the person who wrote it, wrote the narrative, beef it up. This will be at Cultural Heritage Commission, probably the second meeting of August. So there's time for the beef up to happen. So that is what I know. And I'm seeing some chats.
Show sent a
Yes.
picture, Google Maps of the exterior of the building, the home.
And do you guys see that on the screen or no?
Yes.
No, I don't see it,
Oh,
Laura.
you have to hit the chat and just hit the link that.
Yeah, no, we see
Oh,
that. I
okay.
think Laura's trying to share it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Sky is saying happy to chat, but she does need to unmute. You do, Sky, you do need to unmute and answer any questions because we don't use the chat as part of the meeting, because that kind of violates Brown Act. So I'm going to close the chat. What I am going to do, I will share the nomination if I can.
So maybe we can
Go
cut
ahead.
to the chase. Is there any discussion? I mean, I think even without seeing this, I think unless it was just absolutely not what you just said it was, Laura, I would think that we could easily support this nomination without any yeah, I think we could just support it because we generally do, and it does. I agree with it. You know, the whole, you know,
Here we go.
how important is a nice but one of hundreds house, but it does sound like it's unique in that it has a lot of, it's a time capsule.
Right. Oh, that's the word. I couldn't remember the word. It is a time capsule according to staff. So, and it sits on 2 lots. There is room on the lot to save the house and build housing. I'm sorry, that just scrolled really fast. So this doesn't have, I mean, it is feasible that someone could buy the property and add units and retain the house. Teresa.
I was going to ask about the financial hardship, if any, on the current owners, if it becomes a historic monument.
It's in a trust. The family still owns it. And so the financial situation is that whatever monies are earned from selling the property go to supporting, there's two of the heirs are disabled. So the trust is about them, that they have enough funds. But this is not the only property that the trust owns, so that they have funds. And that's not in the nomination, but that's what I was told. So that's probably a letter that the city has that we don't have yet.
I have a question. It's just shocking.
Go ahead.
What exactly changes from it being what it is now to it being declared historic?
I haven't answered
You're going to answer that, John?
that. What if it's not declared historic, it will likely be demolished, and it will likely be, because it's in a high density zoned area and the city is very interested in, making housing everywhere it can because it has to. So it would likely be demolished unless a Good Samaritan comes along and buys it. The value of the house is higher, not as a cultural monument. And that's to Teresa's question. It's basically nominating something as a historic cultural monument strips out value. So you could be taking a family's worth, especially if it's a generational worth, or if it's, you know, a family that doesn't necessarily have a lot of wealth, and taking a lot of the wealth out. So the parcel joined with other parcels, they could become a big apartment building. And likely, honestly, it would, barring a Good Samaritan who would buy it at the higher price of a non-cultural monument. That answer your question?
Right, well, yes, but let's add, this does sit on 2 parcels, and the house is primarily on 1 parcel. And there's depth behind it, and then the side parcel. So again, it doesn't strip all the value, but it will strip some value. And depending on who buys it as well, I mean, who's interested in it, you know, the house itself won't stay a time capsule with a new owner, presumably, because they'd want to use it. I mean, you know, live in the house or make units out of the house. I mean, so in other words, there's sensitive ways to make the house itself housing. But yes, it does reduce potentially, but maybe not, because most developers won't pay more than the market value of the property. You know, so I mean, in other words, don't know for sure, but my recent experience in this Arlington Heights, Angeles Vista area is that the people who want to be developers still are paying the same prices for the properties, regardless of what the end use is. That may not be the case on Crenshaw. You know, so there hasn't been a lot of sales on Crenshaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's likely it will devalue the parcel, and then also you have to take care of this house as a historic cultural monument.
Correct. All right. Well, we
So
don't.
does that mean that excuse me, I'm sorry. Does that mean that that, like you said, if a Good Samaritan came along and purchased it, that they would not be able to demolish the home, but they could build it up and they could retain?
They could build up the property
Around it, behind
but
it, side.
around it, behind it, to the side of it.
But not the actual real property itself.
They would have a lot of scrutiny, and they would have oversight from the city. The city would have a report about what was significant in it. And if there was, then there would be discretionary review of any changes that were proposed by the new owner to change anything inside it. And if it didn't meet the city's expectations, standards, guidelines, whatever you want to call them, that those permits could be denied or be required to be altered.
Like afterwards, okay. And is that one of the reasons why the family is saying no?
Well, the family as a whole is not saying no. They're having an in-family.
An internal thing,
Yeah.
okay.
So in other words, apparently one of the family members has lived in the house and is living in the house now, and is the person who led the tour of the city officials, because again, that tour has already happened, and he's in support of designating the house. And I mean, it's just that it was a large Catholic family in 1915, so it's probably a larger Catholic family today. And there's just different people involved, because the guy who built it is the great or maybe great grandfather of great. So there's a lot of heirs, and they're not in agreement. And again, 25 years ago, they were not in agreement either, because this argument's been going on for at least 25 years.
Wow.
Within their family. So anyway, I'm going to stop the share because we really do need to move on to another item.
I think because it was nominated by CD10, that itself, this wasn't necessarily a community activist or
Correct.
a nonprofit like the LA Conservancy or West Adams Heritage that nominated, because it came from a city official themselves. This says to me that there is some escalated importance to it, and that there's a feeling that, to Heather Hutt at least, and Heather Hutt is, I don't think, isn't working independently. I think she has a feeling about the district and why this is important. So it did come from this, it could come from our
Right.
council district, which is unusual, isn't it? Without a.
Yeah,
a
it's
lot-
not something they do every week. I mean, our experience in Council District 10 is that they do, over time, they have nominated,
Mhm.
you know, I don't know, at more than half a dozen properties as landmarks. So it's more common in Council District 10 than in other council districts for the, you know, various council members to do nominations, but it's not, so it's not unheard of, but it's not usual.
So
Yeah. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, our bylaws also say we support the historic preservation and the conservation of the character of our community. So I think we're on good grounds. I do know that there's further discussions happening with the council office and the planning department about, essentially about protecting Crenshaw. I mean, in other words, it's this little narrow strip between significant historic, you know, neighborhoods, not just Lafayette Square, but Wellington Square, Oxford Square. I mean, it just keeps going with, and it's bounded on either side with designated historic neighborhoods. And there's discussion with the planning department about making the zoning on Crenshaw kind of reflect and be more transitional and not major. I don't know how that's going to go with the housing element and all the state laws, but I know there is a discussion going on right now on that topic as
So
well.
barring the wider city planning initiative and focusing on this house, to
Mhm.
me, since there's ambivalence within the family, there's no development proposal in front of us to
Correct.
demolish it, which to me is a positive, because I, you know, historically, I've been on this committee for 15 years, that I don't like it when a developer proposes something and then to block it, something is designated. So that's not the case. It does seem to be historically important. Our council member is nominated it. So to me, this is all adding up to I agree that there could be some wealth diminishment to this family, but there's ambivalence within the family itself. So that to me says there is room morally, ethically, historic preservationally, that this is something that we would traditionally support, and I would support it, and I would make a motion that UNNC supports our council member Heather Hutt in her nomination of this property at 1802 Crenshaw to be an historic cultural monument, pending the finalization of the report, which sounds like it's not done yet.
I second that.
I can second that, pending the same things that you mentioned as well. I'm not in the family's issue, but I have a similar case going up in the Bay Area. And I think the historic side, there's value there because it's historic in the city and all those things. In my particular situation, being that my grandfather built half of Oakland with his occupation, I feel like, you know, so I'm not in their family situation, but I can see the value of the fact that it is being historic. And I support, you know, as well the city 10.
You know, I thank you, Shooking, and I think this would be really hot right now if there was a demo permit trying to be pulled.
Well, luckily there's no demo permit and there's no sale
That's what I'm saying.
of
So-
any sort anyway.
It's so much easier to just follow someone else's proactivity, which I think is the preferred route, than trying to be reactive.
So, John, since you made the motion, I will call for the vote. And that would, so who can vote are those who live, work, have a stake in, you know, within UNNC's boundaries. So again, we don't know Eric's situation because he didn't respond earlier, but all in favor, if you are able to vote, I'm an aye.
Can I vote? Am I
Yes.
allowed to vote?
Yes, of course. If you are eligible to be on the board, you're eligible to vote.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. My hand is raised.
Okay, thank you.
So it
So,
looks like we have five in favor. Anyone opposed?
That would
Well-
be in Sky.
Great, seeing none, motion passes. Excellent.
thank you. And,
I would
that's
also,
it.
just as a
that-
qualification, I'd recommend that any new information that comes up, if we need to agendize it for the first weekend, the first meeting in August or second meeting in
Right.
August, let's do that.
Well, we would need to do it so again, timeline, we'll take it to the governing board on August 3rd, which will be in time for the Cultural Heritage Commission. But whatever happens at Cultural Heritage, it will then have another 3 or 4 month process going, maybe 3-month process going through city council. So if other important information happens later, we could take another look at it, before it ends up at city council.
Yeah, so
I don't think we need to, but I'm just giving you a timeline.
So I think just leaving the door open for us to change whatever we might need to change as more information becomes available, but
Correct.
if it doesn't, we're good to go.
Okay, Sho, do you still have your hand up to ask a question?
Oh, sorry, no. I was just raising it to vote.
And I have a question. Is Sho your first name?
Yes.
Correctly doing this, Sho? Okay.
Yes.
I don't want to be rude. All right.
Thank you, Laura Myers.
Thank you. Okay, so the next item is adaptive reuse. And I'm trying to, I'm not quite as used to this computer as I am.
I have it. I have a preamble. So we don't have to review. I know the agenda said we're going to review this whole presentation. We don't have to. The meat of it is probably about half to 2/3 of the way through.
Right.
But we can scroll ahead. So in a nutshell, adaptive reuse ordinance was passed about 24 years ago in 1999. And what it was meant to do was meant to rehabilitate larger historic buildings in downtown and in Hollywood just to preserve them. It loosened the building code so that it was flexible, so you didn't have to tear out non-code compliant stairs. You could actually reuse them. And it took away a lot of planning oversight because if you would change a building from office, for example, to residential, the planning code says you need so much open space, you need balconies, you need parking, and all these things meant you couldn't reuse buildings because the code didn't allow it. So the planning code changed and allowed buildings in downtown and Hollywood and a few other areas around town to be adaptively reused for housing. Again, back then it wasn't about housing, it was about reusing, revitalizing older neighborhoods and buildings that were so obsolete that they could not be reused. Fast forward 24 years, housing crisis. Oh, and by the way, the adaptive reuse ordinance in LA was groundbreaking. We're still one of only 2 cities in Southern California that have it, us in Santa Ana. And it has really helped to save many, many, many buildings downtown, keep the lights on and get people into these buildings and use them, and they're beautiful buildings. So now fast forward to 2023, there's lots of state and local laws putting forth housing and trying to get more housing wherever it can. As we all know, there as the ground up projects, the new projects that we're seeing are mostly about housing, and they're trying to use every tool they can, they being the city, to increase the housing stock in the city of Los Angeles. So they're looking to revise the adaptive reuse ordinance, make it citywide, make it apply to newer buildings. It used to be only buildings built before 1974. And now they're looking to expand it to buildings that are 15 years old or older. And they're just looking to apply the same planning rules that apply to newer buildings to the older buildings, and then giving them breaks so that you don't have to tear them down to get them to comply. So that said, this is active. It's a topic everywhere. It's in planning department. I see it at the AAA. It's about architects, about making the adaptive reuse ordinance more expansive. So buildings that are obsolete now, especially with all the office buildings that are empty now, already built, that can't be converted easily into housing unless the adaptive reuse ordinance changes to do that. So here's their cover page. Why are they looking at this? Housing access, looking to convert as many buildings as possible to housing. Post-pandemic commercial recovery, vacant office buildings are probably here to stay unless companies start en masse saying you have to come back to the office. And then, of course, the climate crisis, which is the greenest building is the building that already exists. So really taking advantage of not tearing down things we have, but reusing them, which is a green strategy.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble keeping this
Sure.
cursor stopped. Okay. Well,
So-
I'm now moved to page 11 and then quickly to 12.
So, so the housing element, this is, the city is obligated to provide hundreds of thousands of housing units. So they're looking to do it as many ways as possible. State laws trying to help, if you want to call it helping, some people might be against it. State laws trying to also allow cities to increase their housing stock. And this is just one of the many strategies the city is using to reach the, I think it's 460,000 units that we need in the next 10 years. So adaptive reuse, you can see all the housing incentives that are in the housing element, and adaptive reuse is one of them. Next. Next. This is a lot of next.
Are you stating that they will be using some of the, excuse me, office spaces that are not being used for residencies?
Correct. They're trying to, because there's a lot of vacant office space downtown.
A gang of it.
It's really hard to convert it to housing without having the incentives that the adaptive reuse ordinance provides.
Oh, okay.
It allows for flexibility in the building code. It allows for planning flexibility. It allows for it just makes it easier versus going through a years-long process of getting the entitlements to do this. So citywide adaptive reuse ordinance, it also speeds things up. So developers don't have to wait for 3 years. They can get it done by right, basically. Next. The original adaptive reuse had an average unit size of 750 square feet. They're looking to get rid of that and say, if you can make it a good unit in whatever square footage you have, please do it. Ben and Onus, our firm does a lot of adaptive reuse, and that 750 square foot rule is a real pain because it just.
So is it going to go down as low as 250 or as low as 400?
I am guessing, I'm not sure. I've heard 400 floated. I'm not sure they're going to put a limit on it, but I'm not sure what their attitude is on this.
So sorry. Again, this is, I go near it and it just starts running. Okay.
So again, this is over 15 years old, buildings over 5 years old remain eligible. So there's two levels. There's by right, which is 15 years and older, and there's that zone between 5 and 15 years where the zoning administrator will need to make a discretionary approval. And then buildings that are less than 5 years old aren't eligible. And that's because what developers would do, because they're a wily lot, they would build a commercial building as a commercial building. And then the second it's finished, they'll go, hey, let's do adaptive reuse and turn it into housing. And they get all sorts of goodies. So they're looking to tap the brakes.
Teresa has a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Laura. No, John, is 400 square feet a studio? I mean, what
Yes.
is it? What?
So a very small efficiency unit, which we're getting into like SRO housing, is about 200, 250.
Okay,
A reasonably sized studio is 4 to 5. A nice size studio is 5 to 6. A good size 1 bedroom is 6 to 750. A good size 2 bedroom or decent is 8 to 950 or 1,000. And anything above 1,000, you can start to fit 3 bedrooms in, like 1,050 and above.
and what do we think is a reasonable size for a studio or an efficiency? I mean, there has to be a little kitchen area, you have to have a bathroom, you have to have a closet, you know.
Correct.
What,
So everything needs, kitchens are withering on the vine, even in market rate. Market rate puts them in, but no one uses them. So I think an efficiency kitchen plus a bed area, plus a place for a couch or maybe a fold-down bed, plus a bathroom, and not having much more room, you're getting down into the 200s. When you get above 350, that's when you can have a bed and a couch. And when you start getting above 450, you can have a bed, a couch, a full kitchen, which is about 14 linear feet, and plus maybe a little sitting area. Anything above 500, you start getting into a walk-in closet, a place for a small dining room table. So it's a studio that we could, a bed area that's a little bit removed from the living area. So
Can we make a recommendation? I mean, if we are going to support this, can we make a recommendation on the square footage?
City of LA has never had except with adaptive reuse ordinance V 1.0, has never had it in their code to have minimum unit sizes. That's kind of a suburban thing that happens. That said, I don't know. So we can do anything we want. Let's say that. But so I would say that they would probably be loath to do it and let the market drive that. And because and also the way office is usually deeper, so units are going to be bigger. They might have just a window at the end, but they're going to be deeper and bigger because you can't open up the middle. So I would say, just from my standpoint, because I've done these before, hamstringing a developer in a way that allows them not to maximize the number of units, which is a good thing for the city and everybody because it keeps the housing costs down. I would say it's not in our, what are we looking out for, would be my question. And honestly, I rarely see any developer proposing anything below 350 because they can't rent it. They can't, unless they.
I just don't think it's, what kind of livable space is 200 square feet? Do you know what I mean? Yes, that may help get some people off the streets and give them a room and a bathroom, but it's not like suitable living space. So
Yeah, I was gonna say that's like a closet, right? Like
So I do these all day. So I run the gamut. I design housing for people that are coming off the streets, and the state minimum for a state tax credit unit for a studio is, I think, 220 square feet. We have never, as a firm, I work with scores of nonprofits and developers, we never get that small. You just can't fit anything in it. So the bathroom itself is huge because of ADA. So I would, in my world, 325 is about the smallest we get. Otherwise, it's just not.
So John, I think the units at 1808 St. Andrews, I think they're going to be 250 to 275.
And I think those are more into the single occupancy. I'm not sure.
Correct. They're permanent supportive housing, and there are other places in the same complex for support for recreation, so that the room is just it is a unit. Yes. They would have the ability to cook, but they're not the only living space that these folks will have.
That is correct. So developers, whether they're market rate, for-profit, nonprofit, for homeless, if they are providing small units, they always have a community space where people can congregate. I've never seen an old school SRO building that can fit a twin bed, opens up to a corridor, and that's all you get. You walk out the building and you're done. That doesn't happen anymore. The funding can't support it. Developers can't rent them because funding sources need it. So I wouldn't worry that there's going to be just rampant skid row high rises.
I wanted to say one other thing before, Teresa, let me just, because I think I'm responding to you. I think very deep in the actual, not the fact sheet, not the presentation, but some of the other materials, I think what the planning department ordinance is doing is saying whatever building and safety says is a minimum is the minimum. So they're giving that decision-making to building and safety based on whatever the codes are.
Okay. And what about co-dwelling? I mean, I know there's some.
Next words out of my mouth, Teresa, and there's also co-living that is, I think putting any restrictions on the design also restricts creativity on creating habitable living spaces that we'd have no idea how a 21-year-old wants to live unless some of us in the room are 21 years old. But I think there's ways, again, the nonprofits can't do it because the funding doesn't let them, because they have to provide all this other stuff. And market rate developers won't do it because they won't be able to rent them. So I think allowing creativity for co-living does allow creativity in what defines a unit. I've seen there's a place called Treehouse in Hollywood. That's little bedrooms that have little communal areas, and it's delightful. And they rent.
I think I've seen that place.
It's
As a matter of
delightful.
fact. I have a question. My hand is up if you're done, Ms. Teresa. Okay, awesome. John, you mentioned about the size and the space and something about the communal space. And what came in my mind was, I don't know if you're familiar with Frat Row near USC, how they look like really big homes, but they're like single apartments, and then they all share like a kitchen and like a communal bathroom, kind of like a locker room type bathroom type thing. Is that similarly to what you're describing here? I'm just trying to get a feel for it.
You mean co-living?
Yeah.
Yes,
Co-living, I think, comes in many forms, but generally it's usually a bedroom that has its own bathroom and maybe a lock on the door, and then there's a communal living room.
Right.
That can,
Right.
It's almost
And
like a
it's
suite, like a college suite. I've
Right.
been in a frat row apartment. It's like a suite, and their roommates are kind of roommates, but they're also kind of separate.
they all have their own set. Yeah, that's how it.
We're renting it by bed often, not by room, but that's only one model. I'm not sure that the market rate co-living spaces in, say, there's one being done on Rossmore in Hancock Park, and then Treehouse, the one that John mentioned. Those may have maybe more privacy. I'm not sure. But I do know that the co-living space is being built by USC, not on Frat Row, but near Frat Row, are where it's more like what we used to call dorm suites, like John said, and you rent the bed. I mean, you're charged for the bed, and you are roommates with other people in the same bedroom. So that's more of a
Okay.
student model or a really young person.
Kind of like a dorm, I guess, so to speak.
Well, dorms moved away from dorm living a couple of decades ago, and they created more like suites, so that there's one place that might have a little kitchen or kitchenette, because students in dorms still can go take their meal card and go get meals.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
So
I think I
I'm-
know what you're talking about.
So I'm gonna also put how it pertains to the buildings that are in our area. So let's take, for example, any like commercial 2 or 3 story commercial in Washington. Usually that they already have housing above. That's how they were built. So maybe that's
Right.
a good example. Let's say the Golden State Mutual Life building was sold to do adaptive reuse. That would be applicable. It would be allowed to do it. And what would happen would probably not be a bunch of rabbit chopped up into the building, but they would use that building to have units in it, because the window spacing is what it is. You can't change the building too much because you start to affect its buildingness. So I think the possibility of really, really tiny units in existing building, especially in our area, is really limited.
Right. Well, the example we do have, and they had to go through a whole conditional use permit process, is the adaptive reuse of the hospital.
Yep.
The former doctor's hospital on the corner of 24th and Western was changed into 62 units.
Yep.
And they range in size based on the spaces that the hospital had. So they kept the spaces. Many of them are what they call non-demise, so they're more loft-like spaces. And some of them are more traditional apartment-like spaces because they were the doctor's offices as opposed to a former operating room. So, the different spaces are different because they kept that space, the spatial relationships. So, but they had to go through a very long review process because changing a hospital into housing was not allowed by right outside of downtown. right? So
It was approved. It would have been faster. So my feeling is that buildings like that, other buildings that are just maybe languishing in our neighborhood, whether they're on Jefferson or Western, that making this easier densifies our neighborhood, which is a good thing, I believe. Just brings more people, it revitalizes, it brings investment, and also takes pressure off. It will increase the competition, and then I think decrease the pressure to have new construction because we're providing the housing elsewhere.
Well, I think a good example of a building that's just waiting for this to happen, although the owners may not agree with me, would be the Ross Plaza building.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it hasn't been in good full use for a very long time. Okay.
Where is that? Ross Plaza? What's
It's
that?
Ross Plaza is another kind of iconic tall building, which we have few of, but it's on Western at 18th.
Western and 18th.
But those owners are not necessarily looking to do this. I'm just saying it's for many, it was built as a medical building, medical offices, but the long since not been used for medical. Kind of before the doctor's hospital failed, the medical building failed, and they were semi-related buildings, not totally, but they had some overlapping ownership back in the day. Anyway, and it's just an underused building at this point.
And I'm thinking that tall building that's behind kind of over Arlington and Third.
Yeah.
South of Washington. I mean
Oh,
Washington and Third.
The big brick building?
I think it's a storage building, it has no windows.
Oh, on Third Avenue, south of Washington.
And I can imagine at some point.
Yes.
There'd be some adaptive reuse there to cut windows, appropriate residential windows into the architecture of the building, and that becomes residential. I could see that happening. So, and then the ability to divide up into units would be absolutely based on the grid of the building, which is usually 20 feet, and just how a unit can fit into that. Because you can't recreate the structure, so you have to fit inside.
Okay, so here we are in the middle of this presentation. What they're saying here is pretty much any building, as long as it's 5 years old, would be eligible to do this too, but would have to go through a discretionary zoning administrator conditional use process. So catching us back to the presentation. So John, anything you want to say about that? Or
Nope. I'll just
see, this just moves along. Yeah.
They've got a lot of examples of buildings that either had the discretionary approval or were under the adaptive reuse. A lot of these are KFA buildings like this one.
Okay, what's an ARO project?
Adaptive reuse ordinance.
Oh, Lord. They just do always have to come up with new alphabet soup. I mean, they just can't help themselves. Okay. And? Oh yeah, this is interesting.
This is a KF, this is my project right in front of us. We're allowing rooftop structures for open space, but new rooftop structures can only be 1 story, and they have to be community benefits. So a community room facing a pool, etc. You can't just add new structures and put units in it. So this is more exemptions. You have loading spaces do not need to be there anymore. And a lot of commercial buildings have loading spaces that will no longer be there. Parking is done away with anyway with AB 2097. Teresa.
This is a kind of nuanced thing, John. Those roof decks, can they, we were asked that they be cool roofs?
That is required by code.
Because that didn't look like a cool roof.
So if it's a roof, I think a roof garden is cooler by nature than a dark reflective tar roof, just because it has stuff on it and plants and things. But any new roof in the city is required to be a cool roof these days.
Like with the white coating.
The white. If you look on a map, you see the white roofs. On Google Maps, you see the white roofs all over the place.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
So I think, yeah. Anyway,
Question.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if these developments include parking anywhere. I haven't heard anything about parking.
So this is outside of parking because most of the city, especially in the areas that have buildings that are eligible for adaptive reuse, no longer require parking. That is a state law. So any commercial or residential building, new or old, no longer requires parking. That is as of January 1st of this year.
Get out of town. Okay.
Yeah, that's state law. That came from Sacramento.
Okay. So show just welcome to UNNC's Planning and Zoning Committee.
So that said, it's also a fact that developers do not like buildings with no parking. They like
Right.
their tenants to have parking. So they're probably, I'm imagining there's going to be a cottage industry at some point where there's going to be parking garage developers who rent out their stall.
We're not just parking garage. Yeah, it would.
And $100 a month gets you a stall, and there'll be central parking garages, and people use them on the weekends when they need to get away. That's what my opinion is. But so anyway,
Okay, so here's a grid comparing current to new. And basically the new just has a lot more opportunities.
Yep.
And still going on that. So they're no longer, I mean, this is interesting because I don't know how anyone doing an adaptive reuse ever would have been able to comply with transition heights and step backs since you had an existing building. So they're making it clear in this new ordinance that it is not required, period.
yeah, not addressed. So I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. So here's the answer to your question, Teresa. They're simply saying I'm pointing to the computer and you guys can't see my finger, but minimum unit size must meet minimum standards per the building code, and that's that. They're basically not putting anything in this ordinance.
And then to Show's question, the parking, the original adaptive reuse said any parking that's on site with the building has to be maintained. And so if you have 12 stalls in a 1922 building, you have to retain those 12 stalls. Now, because no parking is required, city can't mandate it, override state law. So now if there is parking on site, say a building has a parking garage on the first few floors, that can be converted to housing. Unlikely though, because clearances in garages are not conducive and slopey floors are not conducive to housing.
Right. And developers like parking, as you said, or at least owners of buildings.
Parking is valuable.
I mean,
Developers
developers don't like to pay to create parking, but then later they have it.
And then also, just to note, office buildings generally have 2 to 3 times more parking in them because they're required to have it back in the day than residential buildings need. It's because office buildings fit thousands of people on any given day that have cars. And if it's residential, it'll fit hundreds of people. So it's far less building load. So there is a lot. I'm doing a project in San Pedro right now. If it's about 200 units and it has 600 or 700 parking stalls. So they're wondering what to do with them all. Anyway, so note that there's a lot of
social communal rooms
well
with low ceilings.
with floppy floors and 8 foot clear.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
oil stains on the floor. So anyway, any observations
Yeah.
that
Okay.
anyone has on this?
Laura does.
Laura.
Okay, and the show has her hand up again too. So the only thing I support this completely, except that it's narrowly limited at the moment to housing, so that it's not making adaptive reuse available citywide to change an existing, say, historical building. For example, anywhere in South LA, one of our historical churches, where they're having dwindling congregations, one way to save the building is to adaptively reuse it as something else. So the congregation may want to sell its church, but they can't find another congregation to buy it at the price they need, perhaps to buy another building that fits their needs better. So for example, a current, recent adaptive reuse of the Roger Williams Baptist Church on Adams near Menlo, it was adaptively reused as a charter school, not housing. And it explored doing housing. I mean, the developer who owned it and the next door Bishop Mansion explored two options. One was a charter school, one was housing, and it was penciled out much better to make it into a school. And they had to go through the whole process of conditional use, I mean, in order to achieve that. This new citywide ordinance making adaptive reuse available across the board, it's only in the ordinance across the board for housing and not for any other use. And while I understand that this is part of the housing elements, and that's the goal they're trying to achieve, is to accomplish the required housing units, I think it's very short-sighted to go to the trouble of amending the entire adaptive reuse ordinance, making it citywide, and not including the ability to convert historical buildings into a new use, even if it's not housing. I mean, it's just crazy making to me that it would have to be yet another ordinance to handle that.
So to me, that is a advocacy viewpoint for historic preservation.
Yes, yes, I'm saying that, but not all church. I mean, I use the word historical, but I mean existing character buildings. You know, I mean, in other words, why can't this ordinance also streamline the conversion for other uses for these buildings?
I would say because that ordinance would be 18 times longer than this one, because developers, as the widely lot they are, they will find some way to convert something. Like even in our neighborhood, schools are an issue. And if they're by right, we'll have schools popping up in various places for whatever reason because of the existing building. So I think there's too many unknowns about, if you had to take out all the variables of what it could be, it just becomes full of loopholes and things that unexpected consequences, whereas the adaptive reuse is proven on a smaller scale for almost 25 years. So I think everyone's used to it. Everyone has been talking about the issues and the problems, and they're trying to pull those out. And the objective, as you say, Laura, is for housing. So I would say, let's start another ordinance that addresses the other things.
Right, it's just another 2 or 3 year process and staff time and hearings. So whereas this could have a section, I'm just saying.
I think it would log jam this, and I think they want
right.
to get it done. But anyway, that's my opinion. Sho, you had another question?
Her hand went down.
No, that was from before, sorry.
So I would say I would want to make a motion to support this unqualified, to make it different. And I think if we want to be proactive about historic buildings in general, especially if we see opportunities in our neighborhood, we can address that at a future meeting. But I think this is a good thing. And again, it takes pressure off of, it just makes the addressing the housing crisis a more creative endeavor without just having new buildings going. So I move to support the changes to the adaptive reuse as presented. Donna?
I agree. West Adams going toward Culver City, they're using many of the historic buildings and keeping their character and doing very interesting things, thanks to Sim, instead of tearing down and putting up something that doesn't go along with or hasn't been, that what they have kind of fits the streetscape, and it's great. So I agree.
And I'm just to add on to that, a developer who has an existing building that they can put housing in with a buy right process versus tearing it down and going up new, that take a longer time process. They're going to take the easier route, and suddenly developers are going to be looking for these buildings to say, I can get this easy route to have a viable property. And so I think it'll spur the incentivize saving these buildings.
Okay, so John, you made the motion.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Don. Any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to call the vote.
All in favor?
2, 3, 4, 5. Show or okay, I see 5. show.
I didn't raise my hand. I think I'm gonna abstain. I don't have enough information.
Okay, so motion passes for
I think it was 4, but it doesn't
Four.
matter.
Yeah,
But it
four,
passes.
four with one abstention. So, and by the way, show abstentions in the world of voting, it means a no vote. Not that that matters.
I mean, I know.
So that just when we go through, when you get to the governing board and we have a whole bunch of abstentions, it does.
It's gonna reflect no and not yes, for sure. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
In UNNC's case, every neighborhood council, 99 of them had to affirm one way or another, because sometimes abstentions don't count at all. So, but like if you have 10 people and 2 abstain, then it's only the majority of 8. But in the case of UNNC, we voted the other way. This was some years ago, but we filled out a form and turned it in. And abstentions end up counting as no's.
Okay.
Not that it matters tonight, just FYI.
So I'm going to leave this meeting now. Laura's going to take the last case.
Okay.
And I did, Laura, if you, during old cases, if you could just let the committee know that that letter for the.
Oh, for tomorrow. John, I need to ask you, are you going to that hearing tomorrow representing UNNC
Oh,
or
boy. Oh, boy.
You don't have to, I can go. Although it would be really
I
good to get
can't-
a phone call at 7:30 in the morning, make sure I get out of bed.
I actually had it in my mind that I was going to go, and then I spent that time writing the letter. Well, the letter was born out of all the things I was thinking I was going to say at the hearing, but I believe that my calendar tomorrow is gummed. What time?
Okay, well, it's at 9 a.m. The only thing is, because of the way they're going to conduct the hearing, I won't know if you're there.
Teresa?
Because we won't be able to see who's there.
Yeah, I have a question about this hearing too, because I was looking at some of the links. I wanted to upload something from the South LA Tree Coalition. I was unable to do that. The links don't seem to be active.
Mhm.
And I thought it was a Zoom meeting. It is in person and Zoom?
It's
Or
just
only
on
in
Zoom.
person? Oh, it's
It's
just
just
on
Zoom.
Zoom, then why are we requesting John to go in?
No, just, well, go, I mean, Zoom go.
Oh, okay.
Zoom
Uh,
go.
I
Or-
will. Do you know where we are in the agenda, Laura? Sorry.
There's only one
we're
item
skipping-
on it. There's only one item and
It's
that's
at
us.
9 a.m.
Actually, any one of us could do it. The letter summarized everything. It'd be an easy thing to present. Any one of us could do it. I really wanted to get all of our thoughts out. So
It was a great letter, John. Laura, you don't want to speak?
No, I'm fine with speaking. What I'm saying is 2 things. Show up doesn't know me, but now she will. One is all this medication I'm taking. I'm having trouble getting out of bed in the morning. So, I will work real hard to do it. And then 2, what I don't know, that's why I was asking John tonight, the way that the planning department is doing these Zoom hearings, it's just dead black. You don't know who's there. It's
Yeah.
not a participatory
really
thing.
hard.
We
Yeah.
can call you or text you, Laura, or email you.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really hard. You're just sitting and all of a sudden they kind of cue you in and you're like, "Hi."
Yeah, so I don't want to say I'm here on behalf of UNNC if John was intending to be here on behalf of UNNC. That's just all I'm trying to coordinate.
I have a meeting at 10 in person in central Koreatown.
So the answer
that would
is,
be difficult for me.
Question, the meeting that you're speaking of, which meeting is that?
it's related to 3022 Crenshaw.
It was
The thing we voted on at the governing board.
With the theater or something?
Theater, exactly.
Oh, yeah, where's that?
On
It's
on
with the
Zoom?
zoning administrator and it's
Okay.
on Zoom.
Okay, and none of you guys can make it? Is that what you're
No, I
saying?
can make it. I just didn't want to step on John's toes.
Oh, okay,
No, I would love, like I said, I wrote the letter in my thinking that I would be presenting it, but I didn't put it in my calendar. So
can I go?
absolutely
Okay.
public meeting.
You
I
can
don't have the
go.
link, but I would love to be there.
Okay.
So
I can-
we veered into item number 7.
Yeah, so sorry, but because you want to leave. So show another little rule is that you can go as an individual and say whatever you want, but what you cannot say is that you're representing UNNC.
Okay,
There's only be one That's why I'm trying to coordinate. Only one person at any
Oh,
given
yeah, that's right.
represents UNNC.
I already said that, yeah, but I'd love to be there. Yes, I can be a fly on the wall for sure.
Okay, so what I can try to do, we didn't ever get an email on this meeting either. It's just a piece of paper we got. So what I can do show later on tonight is take the Zoom link that came on a piece of paper and hope I type it correctly and email it.
Okay.
But hoping I've got it typed correctly. The other way to always track hearings is you can go on the planning department website, and that is planning.lacity.org. Planning.lacity.org.
Oh, it's the city, not,
Yeah.
the
It's a
council.
city.
Okay.
And then if you're on that website, you'll see across the top, they have a bunch of links. One is about. And if you pull down about, you'll see a thing called hearings. And you click on hearings and you'll find this one. And then you could probably click onto the agenda and click right into the meeting. But I will email you at least I'll type it really slowly and correctly, the Zoom link.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next.
Right.
Is there anything else you wanted to say about?
No, I
other-
just wanted to make sure everyone knew. I mean, for such a relatively small project, it brought out more issues
Yeah.
3 times that were really complex, and I think everyone was frustrated. But at the end of our governing board meeting, I thought we got to a really good place of listening and saying, how do we have our voice heard, even though the planning department is saying we can't.
Right. And I would say was a good example of compromise as opposed to a good example of consensus. I don't think there was a lot of consensus.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people got kind of what they wanted, compromise.
And it was also which is my favorite thing, more optimistic. It was trust. CIM is a long-term investor in the neighborhood, and I think if they just ignore
And
it,
not a good one.
we will remind them of it next time they need something from us. So I think, I think Miguel's a good guy. And I think if they can, where there's a will, there's a way. I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed. If nothing comes of it, we can just be madder next time.
And if I could just add 2 cents before you go, John, the young lady who came to the initial meeting and there was some discussion with that presentation. She also was very rude to one of our board members who was trying to have a discussion with her, that young lady and Miguel. I think that's his name. Anyway, I've already crafted a letter that my recommendation as just an individual is that they do not have her front facing for them anymore because she's very contentious and I don't think she respects our community.
I think where that came from was they are right in that by the rules of the planning department, we don't have any conditions on this. And what we were trying to say is that isn't right. We should be able to have conditions on it, and you should be able to put conditions on it to reflect the needs of the neighborhood or the wants of the neighborhood. Otherwise, because they're asking us for a favor. I got that from our meeting, asking us for a favor, and we don't need to rub their noses in it, but we can say, look, let's make this a better project that fits us better. We're all better
Well,
off.
also they're hyper focused on the alcohol CUB, but they also have a conditional use permit for the change of use to an event space.
Yeah.
And that's not as limited in conditions as an alcohol conditional use permit. Because it is true that alcohol permits these days, because of lawsuits, the city can't impose a lot of conditions, but that's not necessarily true on the other one. I don't know all the nuances, but they should have just been not trying to say you can't do this because we can do whatever we want.
And that's where I think Marky, the woman you're talking about, and her youth failed to read the room.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they would have said, let's get to everyone's intent here. And that's where I think she went to the relatively safe place of, this is what the planning department says we can do.
Right.
And
Right.
therefore, we're not going to listen to you.
Yeah.
That was a youth thing.
Yes,
Right.
I agree with you. And also I saw it as an opportunity for her to grow. You know, that interaction with Steve Peckman was certainly unpleasant for her. So hopefully she took that in and said, wow, if I'm going to be dealing with the community, let me avoid what happened before and try to interact with them in a different way.
And I'm
Right.
hoping that our discussions that they were there for, especially the one at governing board, and our letter, which was based on those discussions, is also an opportunity to grow. It's like, look, we're not jerks, and we're reasonable, and please be reasonable with us. So that's another learning opportunity to say, look, and we're not jerks.
Well, and also that first meeting, which also included the Harvard Heights case, which went south even quicker than this one.
Yeah.
I'm getting feedback from the folks from Harvard Heights who were there. It's like, what an excellent meeting. And it's like, oh, I don't think it was totally excellent. I mean, it kind of went into the insults. I mean, it wasn't excellent, but I do feel that we have. I mean, we have an issue where there are so many things that are speeding towards approvals, but might be better projects if they would, whoever they are, I mean, not just this one land use company, but I mean, if applicants would consult, you know, with the HPOZ boards or with the neighborhood council, because they might get some good, decent ideas that will improve a project. I mean, the basic concept is that.
Yeah, Laura, John asked to leave 20 minutes ago.
Oh, sorry, bye.
Yeah, I have lots to say about this, but we can keep this discussion. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody. Have a
All right.
good night.
Okay, you too.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Hi, John. Okay, so Teresa, this next one's kind of your item, but I will, nope. I am trying to do this in an organized way, but do you want to introduce?
Sure. So I kind of track all the motions that come in that are made by council members and then given a council file number through City Hall. And I noticed this one, even though I'm not very familiar with the old Arlington Library, I've heard it referenced many times. And when I saw that they want to, it's a historic facility and they want to change it to make it a park and put some parking in there, I thought it might be something interesting for us to discuss since it is in our footprint. So I sent it to Laura.
Right. And so my first gut reaction was, why is this planning and zoning? And then my second reaction was, well, wait a minute, it's a historical building. And how do we guarantee that this abandoned city-owned building stays standing and gets fixed up if they're transferring away from it the monies that apparently have been designated to it and sending it, I mean, in other words, the use they sent it to, which is to improve the Pio Pico Library Pocket Park and create an underground garage underneath a park. That's what they're doing. They're taking a parking lot and moving it underground and putting a park on top of it. So I think we all support parks, but it's like, well, wait a minute, they've taken the money from our library building, it's not a library anymore, and moving it there. And it's a historical building. It's on the National Register, it's a city landmark, and it's been abandoned 25 years at this point, I think. And so that's why I put it on this agenda. I don't know that there's anything we can do tonight. I mean, essentially the background is that this 1803 Arlington, so it was never called the old Arlington Library. It was always called the old former Washington Irving Library. So I don't know where this old Arlington Library title ever came from. But this was the Washington Irving Library. The reason the staff wanted a new library, besides the aging of the building, library staff years ago, was that it only has one parking space. So it was a walk from, as built, it was the neighbors walk to their own neighborhood library. So it was hugely controversial in the community when this was all happening. And I mean, at Holman, there was a hearing at Holman Church and hundreds of people were there screaming and yelling at each other because there were two sides to every story. And obviously the people who wanted to keep the library in the building lost, and a new building was built, and it's on Bronson and Washington. The deal that was struck supposedly at the time is that the facility could be built, but the books would not be moved. In other words, the library would not move until a use would be found for the old building. And that obviously did not happen, but that was the deal. It did not happen. Eventually, the library department transferred this building into the hands of General Services. Reggie Jones Sawyer was the person in charge, but never found a good nonprofit to take it over. I mean, I'm saying, I can't blame him individually, but I'm just saying, he's the person who was at General Services. He's now an elected official. And I don't know where $5.3 million, when it got allocated to the building, but it's now been removed from the building, and there's still no anything. And I will also say, this is how long ago this goes. While the library was still a library, but it already had trouble keeping up its maintenance, the very first West Adams Heritage Historic Homes Tour raised monies to replace the leaded glass windows on that library, many of which are now smashed again, 40 years later. But so it's annoying as a person who is raising money for it there. But anyway, so I feel, I don't know what we can do about this. I mean, I think this is a real tough deal already. So I'm going to stop the share. Much of what I recounted, I could not find in any council file. And I'm guessing it's probably because it's in library board files as opposed to city council files. So where do you want to go from here?
I don't know. I mean, is there any way that that building can be restored? I mean,
Well, it's what would its use be with a single parking space? So of course, there's always the ability, although I have to say 20 years ago, I thought the highest and best use would be sell it as a single family home for an adaptive reuse. Just make some money. I don't think anyone would do that now. I mean, this is back then.
What about homeless? What about housing for the homeless
But there's still only one parking space. You would need more than one parking space just to staff.
That's if we have services available for the homeless. Okay.
You don't just put them in a building and say, hey.
Well, we're trying to get housing, and if we could do some co-dwelling or something, I don't like co-dwelling, but
I'm saying, so for a long time, what they were doing is, in theory, was trying to find a nonprofit. So the way it works in the world of when the city keeps a building is they have to appraise its value. So let's say the value at this point is $1 million, just because it's an even number. What they would do is find a nonprofit who would pay $1 a year, but they would have to provide $1 million worth of services over 10 years. And they also would have to provide the funds, the capital funds, in this case, to rewire, put plumbing in and all those things. So it's, it'd be very hard to find the right nonprofit use and entity that could actually not just provide the services, but you now have a building that's not functional and hasn't been functional in years, which is probably why at some point somebody allocated money to fix up the building and then find the nonprofit. Show you have your hand up.
Is it possible to get any of those funds back to return for that reason? Because I have some ideas on, what to do with the space. I don't know of any tech centers around here, like for STEM, stuff like that. And that's if that's not the future, that's right now. And everyone, and I'm not an ageist, so I would say that teaching everyone some level of technology and IT. I worked in tech sales, so I'm super adamant about hip hop and technology specifically. So that was my thought even years ago. And I remember that meeting at home, and I remember I was quite young, but I remember those times, and even becoming a part of a group that was adamantly, wanting to use the space because it was abandoned for over 10 years. So we had put in to try and use the space just, to use it because it's city property. And it was our understanding that when something is dormant, that the citizens of the area could use the space until it's, I guess recalled by the city government. So, but yeah, I have plenty of ideas for the space, even with having one parking space.
Right. Well, I can, so I don't know, Teresa, maybe what we should be doing is asking drafting a letter, not here tonight, but drafting a letter from UNNC to Council District 10 that the board approves on August 3rd. Keep adding agenda items, but draft a letter requesting that, I don't know, that we have a sit down and a real discussion with the council office about the future of this building. Something to that effect, but I don't think we can just take an action on our own.
No, I think that's great idea. And also, I'd like to know where was that $5.3 million? And what fund was that? Who knew that there were even funds allocated for the restoration of that building? And
well, I don't mind calling Andrew Westall and asking him that question because he's probably the person who would know. But I don't want to go much farther than that without the board having done some action supporting that we are doing something.
yeah, that's fine. I mean, why don't we just, we can come up with a letter. I mean, it's just for discussion tonight. We can put it on the
Right.
agenda and then,
Right, because Kamani might know too. I mean, I'm thinking Hakeem's not going to know. I mean, I wherever those funds came from would have been prior watch, wouldn't have been on Mark Ridley Thomas watch, it would have been Herb Wesson.
Right.
And so that would have been Andrew, who's back in the office, or Kamani, maybe it would have known, but more likely. Well, Kamani now is jumped up and over because he's chief of staff. So anyway.
Okay, so why don't we move forward in that way,
Okay.
that direction?
I'd love to assist in that, Miss Teresa, if you need my assistance.
I'm going to be assisting Laura, but yes,
Oh,
Shelley,
no.
we can all work together on
We'll
that.
all work together then.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll all work together on that. And I did put out an email, but it was real last minute, to Karen Haas, who was one of the persons leading the charge against losing the library, but I don't know if she's at all interested now. I mean, it's so many years later. And the other person who was really deeply engaged was Maureen DeBose. Herman, I don't know if you know Herman, Teresa. Well, he was also on the UNNC board for a while. And he was on the Western Heights, Harvard Heights, HBOZ.
Yeah.
So his wife was very involved, but it left a lot of angry feelings in the community.
Well, I just feel like this is another example of the city owning property like the Isidore House, and they don't do anything with it. And then we're left with dilapidated buildings, deteriorating, eyesore in our community.
Well, the
and-
city as slum landlord.
Yeah, oh, that's what Donna Jones calls them all the time, right, Donna? Slum
Well,
Right.
landlord.
this
Right,
house where I'm
right.
sitting, South Seas House, was the city as slum landlord. I mean, the whole background story was vagrants were living here and they set the living room on fire
Right.
because they're trying to keep warm. It's crazy. The city owned the
Precisely.
house.
But never giving up is the mantra, because looking at on the corner of Arlington and Adams, that house, and what happened with Southeast and the house on the corner of Arlington, we did not give up.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, anyway, so we have a plan-ish, sort of.
And it's truly a precious building. We know everybody wants
Oh, yeah.
it to be saved. So it's not a matter of not having support, because there's support everywhere for that library. And
Right.
doing something with it, there's many things. And that fire department around the corner has
Oh my-
parking.
True. That's true.
And
So-
it's just half a
It
block
does.
from it. So there's not a problem of being able to have parking for that building. It could be used for anything that we could come up with, and many anythings, not one anything.
Right. Because years ago, when it was still owned by the library department, there was a national movement, out of the National Trust, but to do what they call Main Street resource centers, but they're libraries, but they had resources for urban,
Yes.
redevelopment. And it was like, this would be the perfect Main Street resource.
Oh, yeah, it would be great.
Center.
And then, because parking was a big issue, but it's there. The fire department, it's a short walk,
Correct.
not a problem.
And that building's so underutilized that the parking, they don't need the parking.
You're right. So there you go. So we've got the answer. All we need to do is,
Get the 5.3 million back,
yeah, sure.
or a new 5.3
go!
million. Just a small little challenge.
Yeah.
They've got pots everywhere. Okay, so don't worry.
Yeah.
There's plenty of pots.
Okay. All right. Well, let's
We'll work on it, Laura, and
Right.
then we'll bring it back, I'll put it on the next agenda or next month. And
right.
we're
Yeah. So
fine.
we do have a development person coming. I mean, an actual project coming on August 2nd. So an actual building being proposed kind of project. But that doesn't mean we can't bring this back too. Like
Okay.
11. Okay. So it's 8:30. Not quite as early as we wanted to be done, but not 9 o'clock.
All right.
And is there any other follow-up to previous cases or old business? I know we talked about tomorrow. Okay,
I don't have anything.
then we can adjourn.
Okay, and then Cheryl, since I have you here, since we've adjourned this
Wait.
meeting.
Wait, should I
Oh
adjourn?
yeah,
the-
stop the YouTube.